Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a journey into the fascinating world of Magic, the Gathering. Now, for many of us, MTG is about the thrill of drawing that perfect card, pulling off an epic combo, or, just gathering around a table with friends for a casual game. It's deeply personal, right? But today we're going to put aside that inherent fun, that nostalgic pull, and strip it down to something else entirely. A serious monetary investment. We're looking at MTG through a purely financial lens, which I have to admit is a bit of a wild shift in perspective for someone who spent countless hours just playing the game.
Indeed. And that's precisely our mission today. We're here to unpack a really critical question for anyone considering MTG as a genuine asset, moving beyond just casual collecting. Is it better to put your hard-earned capital into sealed booster boxes? Or should you go for individual cards? This isn't just a casual debate you'd hear at your local game store, right? We're diving deep into the factors, the often overlooked hidden costs, the long-term implications. We're really trying to separate the true investor from, say, the casual flipper. It's a surprisingly complex landscape. And as we'll see, a lot of the common assumptions about collectible investments just don't hold up under cold, hard, numbers-driven scrutiny. We're essentially here to give you the shortcut, the inside track on being well-informed on this specific niche.
Okay, let's unpack this then. When we talk about investing, whether it's the stock market, real estate, or in this very specific case, a stack of Magic cards, the first thing that always comes up is the time frame. Are you in it for a quick buck, hoping to turn something over tomorrow, or are you genuinely in it for the long haul, playing a completely different game? Because that distinction, well, our research clearly shows it dramatically changes everything about your strategy, your expectations, and ultimately your potential for profit. It's the foundational principle, really, that separates a sound financial decision from what often just amounts to speculation.
Absolutely, and this raises a really important question. What truly defines a long-term investment, particularly when we're talking about alternative assets like collectibles? Based on the foundational principles taught in every business school and drawing from the experience of seasoned brokerage firms. The absolute minimum time frame for genuine long-term investing needs to be at least 5 years. Think about that for a moment. 5 years. That's not just a casual suggestion, right? Not some polite guideline. It's a foundational principle of wealth generation. When you're dealing with assets that can fluctuate pretty wildly in value over short periods, assets that require patience to mature and appreciate, well, anything less than 5 years often falls squarely into the realm of speculation. Or, as we often see in the hobby world, just flipping, buying something cheap and immediately trying to offload it for a quick profit. True investors, the ones building sustainable wealth, they're playing a different game entirely. They're not looking for immediate gratification.
They're looking for compounding growth over a significant, often multi-year period, allowing their investment to ride out market cycles and benefit from long-term trends.
5 years. Wow. So if you're like some players I know, buying a new box of cards this week because you heard a rumor about a potential ban list update, or maybe a sudden spike in a particular card's price from a recent tournament, and you're hoping to flip it next month for a quick profit. You're really not an investor in this context, are you? You're more of a short-term speculator, maybe even an arbitrager trying to exploit these fleeting market inefficiencies. It sounds like trying to win the lottery every day rather than building a solid long-term portfolio. Just a very different mindset with very different risks involved.
Precisely. Real wealth, the kind that creates lasting financial stability and growth within the definition of genuine investing, it's generated from long-term positions. Those who aim to flip products quickly, especially with volatile assets like individual Magic cards, they often face significant disappointment. Think about it. Data shows that a box you might have bought for, let's say, $19 last year could very realistically still be worth only $9 today if you're not playing the long game. This immediate turnaround approach just doesn't align with true investment principles because you're constantly fighting against market volatility, often crippling transaction costs, and frankly, the fickle, unpredictable nature of short-term demand. A short-term approach means you're almost always at the mercy of the current market whims, susceptible to every dip in price correction. Whereas a long-term perspective, well, it allows you to ride out those inevitable dips, benefiting from the overall upward trend if one exists as the product matures. It's truly like trying to time the stock market on a daily or weekly basis versus investing in a broad market index fund for decades. The latter is where genuine, sustainable, and frankly less stressful growth tends to occur. Patience isn't just a virtue in investing, it's really a requirement.
That makes total sense. It really highlights the difference between playing the game for fun, where, you might buy a few singles for a new deck, versus approaching it with a serious investor's hat on. Oh, and speaking of selling, just as an interesting side note for anyone maybe dabbling in online sales, perhaps trying to clear out some older prints of their collection, there's a curious detail about IRS reporting thresholds for PayPal sales. Apparently, if you have less than $20,000 in PayPal sales per year and fewer than 20 individual sales, PayPal does not automatically report that information to the IRS. Now, of course, you're still legally obligated to report all your income, that goes without saying. But it's a small detail that might be relevant for smaller scale operations, like someone just getting their feet wet, selling off a few binders of old cards. It maybe offers a little bit of a grace period before you're automatically under the magnifying glass for tax tracking, though, again, the responsibility to declare is always yours.
That's a good point to tuck away for anyone looking to monetize their collection, even if it starts as just a casual side venture. It's crucial to understand those thresholds. But let's bring it back to the core investment strategy for Magic, the Gathering. We've established the necessity of a long-term mindset, 5 years plus. Now comes the central dilemma.
All right, here's where it gets really interesting. And honestly, this is the question that comes up in every collector's discussion forum, every Facebook group, every late night conversation among players. If you have a specific amount of capital, let's use the example number, say $540, which, by the way, is a common enough budget for a serious hobbyist or maybe a budding investor, are you better off buying a case of 6 booster boxes? Those typically cost around $90 a box, right? So that's your $540. Or should you take that exact same $540 and invest in individual non-foil near mint to mint cards? The example used was 30 raw fetch lands. And for those maybe not deep in the MTG weeds, fetch lands are some of the most powerful, consistently reprinted, and highly sought after lands in the game. They form the bedrock of so many competitive decks across formats. They're almost universally liquid and desirable. So it's a classic head-scratching dilemma for anyone looking to put their money into the game with an eye toward appreciation.
This truly is the crux of the discussion. And it's where many casual approaches to investment really fall short. It's where gut feelings often diverge from hard data. Our research has crunched the numbers pretty extensively to provide a clear answer, and it comes down to a few key factors that often get overlooked by amateur investors, or perhaps more accurately, are simply not considered in their full impact. The primary factors include, as we just discussed, your chosen timetable for holding the investment, that crucial minimum of 5 years, and crucially, your cost of capital. Now, cost of capital might sound like something only a massive corporation worries about, some abstract financial term. But for an individual, it's equally, if not more, important. It refers to the implicit or explicit cost of tying up your money in one asset rather than another. For you, the listener, if that $540 could be earning, say, 5% in a high-yield savings account right now, or generating a modest return in a low-risk index fund, then any investment in Magic cards needs to at least meet, or ideally significantly exceed, that alternative return to justify the opportunity cost and the added risk that comes with a niche collectible market. It's not just about what you pay for the item on day one, it's about what your money could be doing for you elsewhere. And if your MTG investment is truly the best use of that capital over the long term, accounting for all the costs.
Okay, so you've made your choice. Let's say you've put your capital into either a case of sealed product or that stack of highly sought after singles like the fetch lands. You've patiently held on to them for that 5-year minimum, watched them hopefully appreciate in value. Now, the moment of truth. It's time to realize your gains. This isn't like selling a stock where you just click a button on an app, right? How do you actually go about selling your Magic investment? And perhaps more importantly, what are the hidden costs, the profit eaters that can significantly bite into your expected gains? Our research highlights 2 primary methods, and they each come with their own set of considerations and, frankly, frustrations.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture of liquidation, the first option, and probably the most common for the average player just looking to cash out a few cards, is selling to a local game store, LGS. Right. This offers convenience, often an immediate cash payout or store credit. Handy. However, you are going to get significantly hammered on the price. That's the term often used, and it's pretty accurate. If a card is currently selling for, say, $10 on the open market, don't expect more than $7, and often much less, maybe $5 or $6 from your local shop. Stores typically buy products at least 30%, sometimes even 50% or more, below current market value. And this isn't arbitrary or them trying to take advantage. It's a fundamental business necessity for them. They have to account for their own cost of holding inventory that means the money they've tied up in a product, sometimes for weeks, months, or even years before it finally sells. Then there's their cost of capital, which for a business can be around 5% or more if they're drawing on a line of credit to finance their inventory purchases. And of course, the big one, the duration the product might sit on their shelf, collecting dust, before they can sell it for a profit. They need a substantial margin on their purchase price to cover all these operational costs, rent, utilities, staff salaries, and still turn a profit for themselves. So while a local game store offers a quick, guaranteed sale, it comes at a very significant discount to your potential earnings. You need a very, very large profit margin on your initial investment just to net anything substantial from selling to a local game store. If you bought something for $100 and it's now worth $130 on the open market, selling it to a store after their 30–50% cut means you're breaking even at best, or maybe even taking a loss once you factor in your initial buy-in. It's basically a convenience tax.
That truly sounds like a tough road for the seller. Ouch. It really highlights the fundamental difference between just casually offloading a few cards and seriously realizing investment gains. So it makes sense that for serious investors, selling online, especially through platforms like eBay, is often the preferred route. It gives you access to a much wider market of potential buyers. Right. But even there, it's not as simple as listing an item, clicking a few buttons, and watching the money magically roll into your bank account.
Yeah.
There are layers of fees and logistical challenges that can surprise the unprepared, I imagine.
Not at all. Let's delve into the online selling costs, because this is where many hopeful investors get caught off guard. They often drastically underestimate the true cost of exit. If you opt to open an eBay store, which is almost a necessity for any significant volume of sales, you're looking at approximately a 9% selling fee on the final value of your item. This is eBay's cut for providing the platform, the audience, the transaction infrastructure. Fair enough. On top of that, if you're a new or lower volume seller, PayPal typically charges an additional 3% fee for processing the transaction itself. Combined, that's a 12% cost right there just to find a buyer and process the payment. So right off the bat, if you sell an item for $100, you're losing $12 before you even think about getting it into the buyer's hands. That's a significant chunk, and it's just a non-negotiable part of the online selling landscape. You have to build it into your calculations from day one.
12% gone already. Okay, then there's shipping, which I can only imagine gets incredibly complicated and expensive, especially for collectible items like magic cards. They need to arrive safely and, crucially, with proof of delivery to protect both buyer and seller. You can't just toss a booster box in a regular envelope, can you? It's not like sending a birthday card.
It absolutely does. This is where the rubber meets the road, as they say. And where the difference between selling a sealed box versus individual cards becomes glaringly apparent. For a single booster box, if you just walk into the post office and use priority mail without any special commercial accounts or optimized packaging, you could be looking at around $18 to ship it across the country. That's a significant hit to your profit margin. On a, say, $90 box, it's 20% right there just for shipping. Ouch. However, with smarter shipping methods like using online postage services, Pirate Ships is a popular one, and gaining experience in efficient, secure packaging, you can potentially get that cost down dramatically, maybe to 5–7 hours per booster box. That's a huge difference, but it requires research, effort, and often a bit of volume to learn the ropes. But the real, genuine, unvarnished challenge arises when you're selling individual cards. This is where the cost can really spiral out of control for the unprepared.
Okay. So if you're selling those 30 fetch lands separately, one by one, to 30 different buyers, that's where the costs could truly skyrocket, right? Because each card, even if it's small and light, presumably needs its own postage, its own envelope, its own protective top loader, and crucially its own tracking number if you want to protect yourself from lost mail or buyer claims. Which happened, right? It sounds like a logistical nightmare just thinking about it.
Very much so. This is perhaps the single biggest logistical and cost hurdle for the individual card investor. If you sell individual cards, and you want to protect yourself from potential loss, damage, or the unfortunate reality of buyer claims, because trust me, those claims happen. Whether they're legitimate or not, you absolutely, unequivocally need to include tracking. This typically costs around $2.50 per individual card for basic tracking service within the United States. Once you factor in the stamp, the rigid top loader, the sleeve, the envelope, all of it. So if you're selling 30 individual fetch lands, which is a common scenario if you're liquidating a large number of singles, and they're going to 30 different buyers, you're looking at approximately $80 in shipping costs alone. And remember, that's before the 12% in platform fees.
$80 just for shipping on a $540 initial investment for 30 separate sales. That's wow, that's literally about 15% of your initial investment just eaten up by logistics and the sheer individual product movement. Plus, that means managing 30 separate packages, 30 separate envelopes, 30 separate tracking numbers, and potentially 30 separate customer service interactions if something goes wrong. The time investment alone in carefully preparing and shipping all those individual cards must be immense, quite apart from the monetary cost.
That sounds less like a passive investment and more like taking on a part-time job for a day, just for a relatively small batch of cards.
Exactly. The time and labor involved are often drastically underestimated by those new to the investment side of collectibles. It's not just the monetary cost of shipping, it's the sheer mental and physical overhead of managing dozens or even hundreds of individual transactions. Now, compare that to shipping an entire case of 6 booster boxes. Our research indicates that the cost to ship a whole case together as a single consolidated package can be as low as $10.
$10. Think about that difference. $10 for a case versus $80 for 30 individual cards. This starkly illustrates the massive logistical and cost efficiency advantage that sealed product holds when it comes to the exit strategy of your investment. It emphasizes that there are 2 crucial moments for an investment's cost basis: entry when you buy it and exit when you sell it. You need to factor in what you'll actually net after all expenses, not just the gross sales price. Many people focus so heavily on getting a good buy-in price, they spend hours hunting for the perfect deal, but they completely neglect how much it will truly cost them in time, effort, and fees to actually get the product out the door and into the buyer's hands. That oversight can easily and unexpectedly wipe out a significant portion of their potential profit, sometimes even turning a perceived gain into an actual loss.
Wow. Okay. So what does all this mean for our initial question? Given all these selling complexities, the time commitment, and these significant hidden costs, which option truly makes more sense for the serious investor looking to put their capital into Magic: The Gathering? It feels like we're heading towards a pretty clear answer here, especially after breaking down the, well, logistical nightmare and cost implications of shipping individual cards versus a single consolidated product. My gut tells me I know what you're going to say, but I'm curious for the full analysis.
Well, this raises an important question, and for many, it might be a counterintuitive one. What's the recommended path, especially if you're optimizing purely for investment return? Our research strongly and repeatedly recommends buying sealed product over individual cards for investment purposes. The numbers, particularly those related to the exit costs and the friction of the sales process, they simply don't lie. While individual cards might initially seem to offer more granular control over your investment, maybe picking winners, the practicalities of selling them efficiently and profitably at scale make them far less appealing for pure investment plays. The sheer friction of selling individual items, the fees, the tracking, the packaging, the customer service, it's a major profit eater. It's almost like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
So even if you buy those 30 fetch lands for $540 cards that are arguably some of the most liquid and universally desirable in the game, the kind of cards players are always looking for, the selling process alone, factoring in those high individual shipping costs, the inherent risk of loss if you skip tracking to save buck, which you shouldn't, and all those marketplace fees, it just significantly eats into any potential profit. It's almost like trying to collect water in a sieve if you're hoping for significant net gains. You might get a great price for the card, but by the time it's actually in the buyer's hand and the money's in your account, a huge chunk is just gone.
Precisely. And beyond the clear logistical and cost advantages of selling sealed product as a single unit, there's a conceptual benefit unique to sealed product that adds a layer of value that individual cards simply cannot capture. When you invest in a sealed box, you're investing in the possibility of all being gems. You're buying into the inherent potential of unopened product, which holds a premium that transcends the current market value of its known contents if you were to break it open. It's not just the sum of its parts, it's the potential of those parts, coupled with the allure of discovery. Every booster pack, every sealed box represents a kind of lottery ticket. And that lottery element for many people is worth paying extra for. You aren't just buying cards, you're buying the dream of pulling that chase mythic or a high-value foil, which elevates the perceived and often the actual value of the sealed item. It's a powerful, almost alchemical transformation that happens when cards remain unopened.
Right. And this brings us to a fascinating, almost psychological factor that adds unique value to sealed product, what our research calls the gambler's premium. It's something every player understands on an intuitive level, I think, even if they don't articulate it this way. That feeling when you crack a fresh pack, the anticipation of peeling back that wrapper, the smell of new cards, it's part of the game's magic, isn't it? It's core appeal. I've definitely been there, heart pounding, hoping for that specific card.
What's truly fascinating here is how that emotional, recreational aspect translates directly into market value. It's quantifiable. People are genuinely willing to overpay for the sheer experience of opening booster packs, the smell of fresh cards, the satisfying feel of tearing open the wrapper, the palpable anticipation of what rare or mythic might be lurking inside, the thrill of discovery that comes with each card revealed. This intangible value, this gambler's premium, It undeniably exists and contributes a unique premium to sealed boxes that individual cards simply cannot capture. A single card, no matter how valuable, has already been opened, identified, its mystery revealed. It's a known quantity. A sealed box, on the other hand, perpetually holds that tantalizing possibility of something even greater inside. And collectors, players, and even other investors will pay a premium for that experience, that chance. It's an emotional component that translates directly into market value, making sealed product inherently more appealing to a broader market, including those who simply love the thrill of the rip.
That's so true. I mean, I've definitely paid for that experience myself many times over the years. There's an undeniable excitement about cracking open a fresh pack, hoping for that rare pull, that chase card you've been dreaming of. It really is part of the fun of the game. So it seems that fun factor, ironically, actually contributes to its investment viability. It's not just about the raw cardboard, but the experience it offers.
Furthermore, our research points to natural attrition as a significant, often overlooked factor supporting the long-term value of both sealed products and the individual cards contained within them. Over time, cards are naturally lost, damaged, or even completely destroyed. Think about it. A spilled drink at the game table, a house fire, a flood, a mishap during shipping, or simply misplacement over decades. How many childhood collections were played with without sleeves, bent, shoveled into oblivion, or simply tucked away in an attic and forgotten, maybe eventually discarded? The total quantity of existing cards naturally declines as time moves on. This constant, albeit slow, reduction in the available supply leads to increased scarcity and, consequently, potentially higher value for the remaining cards. And especially for sealed products that represent a pristine, untouched collection of those cards from a particular era. It's a quiet background force that continually pushes values upwards for truly rare and old products. Every year, more cards are removed from circulation, whether intentionally or accidentally, making those that remain particularly in perfect condition and sealed increasingly precious.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really sounds like the sealed box is seen as a more stable, almost diversified investment compared to individual cards. You're not putting all your eggs in the basket of a single card whose value could tank with a surprise reprint or shift in the game's meta, right? You're spreading your risk across an entire set, and you're benefiting from these unique, almost philosophical factors like the gambler's premium and natural attrition, which individual cards don't quite capture to the same degree. It just feels like a more robust strategy overall.
You could certainly make that argument. Absolutely. In fact, our research even likens investing in a sealed box to choosing a mutual fund of investing. Instead of putting all your eggs in the basket of a single stock, or in this case, a single card, you're investing in a basket of possibilities. A sealed box represents a diverse collection of potential value, containing everything from commons to ultra-rare mythics. And that diversity has built-in protections. It benefits from the collective desirability of the set, the gambler's premium we discussed, and the long-term effects of natural attrition. This suggests a more stable and less volatile approach compared to the logistical complexities and inherent risks of managing and selling individual cards. You're relying on the overall desirability, playability, and scarcity of the set as a whole, rather than the specific, often unpredictable performance of a handful of individual cards. It's a broader, perhaps more conservative play in the speculative yet potentially rewarding world of Magic investments.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So for the investor who chooses the sealed product route, understanding all these nuances about time frames, the cost of capital, those complex selling costs, what kind of realistic returns can they expect over that 5-year plus time frame? We're not looking for a get-rich-quick scheme here because we've already established that's not what investing is about, but rather, what's a sensible return for a patient long-term commitment?
Well, our research suggests that, on average, Magic, the gathering sealed product that's genuinely worthwhile as an investment. So, picking the right sets is still key. It will likely net around a 5–10% return per year. This isn't speculative. It's based on historical data of products that have proven their value over time. This 5–10% isn't arbitrary. It typically comes from sets that demonstrated strong playability, introduced unique and popular mechanics, featured iconic characters or art, or had particularly strong competitive appeal at their time of release. It's about discerning which sealed products have that kind of enduring long-term appeal that will continue to drive demand years later. Now, while there are certainly outliers, we've seen sets like the original Innistrad block, for example, which reportedly saw exceptional 35% annual returns for 5 years in a row, year over year.
Wow, 35%.
Yeah, incredible numbers. But these are crucially exceptions. They are not the general rule to base your investment strategy on. It's paramount not to chase these outlier returns, as they often involve a level of risk, unpredictable market conditions, or unique circumstances that are simply impossible to predict or replicate consistently.
A steady, predictable 5–10% is actually a very respectable return for an alternative asset class, especially when you compare it to more traditional, lower-risk investments like bonds or even some broad market indexes. It's about setting realistic expectations and understanding that even in the world of collectibles, sustainable growth is usually incremental, not explosive, and it requires discerning choices up front.
Right. So what does this all mean for you, our listener? The clear, unequivocal recommendation from our research seems to be prioritize sealed product for long-term investment. Even while acknowledging, of course, that collecting individual cards and building decks offers the unparalleled fun and enjoyment of the game itself. That's why most of us started playing. But this deep dive has been strictly about the monetary risk versus reward aspect, stripping away all that inherent enjoyment that initially draws us to Magic. And from that purely financial lens, considering all the hidden costs, the logistical challenges, and the unique market forces, the sealed product stands out as the superior investment vehicle.
Indeed. It's really about optimizing for the net profit after accounting for all costs, from the initial purchase to the holding period to that crucial exit strategy. And while the cost basis at entry is vital, especially early on, over a sufficiently long time frame, if the value of the product truly skyrockets, let's use that example again, a box you bought for $90 is now selling for $300 in 10 years. Well, the initial nuances of the cost basis become less critical. Those few dollars of difference in your original buy-in become almost irrelevant in the grand scheme because the overall value has increased so dramatically.
Right. The big picture takes over.
Exactly. At that point, the long-term substantial appreciation simply dwarfs the initial minor cost variations. It's about the magnitude of the final value, not the precision of the initial buy-in. It truly is a marathon, not a sprint.
And with that, it leaves us with a bit of a provocative thought. If the intangible thrill of opening a pack, that gambler's premium, can directly and demonstrably influence the market value of a sealed product like a Magic box, what other seemingly fun or emotionally driven factors in our hobbies or interests might secretly be influencing their long-term investment potential in ways we haven't even considered? Maybe your old comic books, your vintage video games, perhaps even your collection of action figures. What stands out to you? Well, that's all for this deep dive. Until next time.